good day. And it's a nice day here at this time that I was taping. I don't know what it's going to be like when you listen, but anyway, today we have Lindsey Fuentes-George.
Fuentes-George, yes.
Fuentes-George.
Yes.
So good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, would you like to tell the public something about yourself?
Sure.
Where you were born and where you live?
I'd love to. I was born in Georgia, and my parents are both originally from Georgia, and they're both farmers. My sort of background, my grandparents were farmers on both sides. My dad's family was also working class, working up, not necessarily on a farm, but doing some small time farming and then working, and my mom's family owned a tobacco farm and had sharecroppers way back when. Not as much when my mom was growing up, but her grandparents had a sharecropping tobacco farm. And my grandma grew up there, and then my grandfather, my mom's dad, was Puerto Rican by way of New York, so his family had moved from the island to New York around the time that I think Puerto Rico became part of the United States. And so he grew up in New York and then entered the Army and was stationed down in Georgia and met my grandma. So my mom was born there, my dad was born there, they lived in the same town, Statesboro, Georgia, which is also where I was born. And sometimes people recognize it because the Allman Brothers Band wrote a song called Statesboro Blues. So that's about Statesboro. That's our small claim to fame. My dad and my mom got married quite young. My mom was still in high school, and her big grudge was that they wouldn't let her be homecoming queen because she was married her senior year. So they told her she was ineligible to be homecoming queen. So that was the thing that she was most upset about.
Yeah.
with being married young. But eventually my mom and my dad divorced. By that time, actually, my grandmother and my grandfather had divorced also on that side, and my grandfather had started out in the Army and then had gone back to get his teaching degree. So he had started working in education in a very small town in Georgia on the coast, where he was, he liked to say he was the principal and the head teacher and the custodian and the groundskeeper, because it was just a very small school that he worked. And so he had eventually moved to Amherst, Massachusetts, and was teaching at the university there. So when my parents divorced, my mom moved there. So that's all a very long story to say. I grew up partially in Amherst, Massachusetts. That's where I went to school and where I grew up. And in the summers, I would...
You went to elementary school and high school?
Just elementary school. I grew up, I went to a small public school there that actually, Mary Hogan reminds me a lot of the school I went to. Yeah. And then in the summers, I would spend down in Georgia with my extended family. So I spent a lot of time, in pecan orchards and running around with no shoes on and that sort of thing with my grandmother, and shelling peas and that sort of thing. And then my mom and I both together moved to Florida for middle school. So I've kind of sampled a little bit of public education in the United States. And then in high school, I moved back to Georgia, and I lived with my dad in a very small town, very rural town in Georgia. And then I went to college. I moved back up to Massachusetts for college. I went to Mount Holyoke. And that is where eventually I met my husband, so Kami, who he had come to the United States in 1997 to go to college. He's originally from Jamaica. And then he went to college in Ohio and wound up at UMass for graduate school. We met there through a mutual friend who was in his program. And then we moved around a lot. So long story short, moved around a lot, lived in a lot of different places. I think I'm kind of the in-between of, I know Gary grew up here and is originally from here, and then Farhad came from pretty far away, and I think I'm the the, I'm sort of the new Vermonter, but originally from the United States. So
When did you move to Middlebury?
we moved to Middlebury in 2011. My husband, we had been in Virginia for a couple years. He had been teaching at William and Mary. And, people who aren't in academia may not remember, but the economy had kind of tanked really badly, and a lot of schools were having hiring freezes around that time. And so you were having a lot of people graduating from, their lifetime's work, and they finally achieved their PhD, and there really weren't very many jobs. So he had taken a job at William and Mary that was just, a 1-year contract, and then they renewed him again, and we felt very fortunate to have that option. And then he came here to interview for a job here in Middlebury, and and he came back to Virginia after the interview, and he said, "I'm not going to get this job because I just like it too much." He said the town is adorable and everybody's friendly, and I really, really want this job. And I think he felt like it was kind of too good to be true, given how badly the economy was going at that point, and how many schools had hiring freezes. But he was offered the job, and we felt very grateful to come here, and very happy to be new to Middlebury at that time.
And where do you live in Middlebury?
Currently, we live in East Middlebury. When we first moved here, we moved to South Street, and we were in some college housing there. And then 3 years ago, I was about to have our third child, and I said, leading up to it, I said to Kami, we either need to move now or we're going to have to wait 2 years, because I'm not moving with an infant or a toddler. So we just decided to kind of dig in and do it. So we found a home in East Middlebury. Lily and Lino used to live there. And it's a very nice home, and we love it. I love that my kids can kind of roam the neighborhood, and if they don't know everybody in every house, they know somebody in every other house. And I like that they can go down to the library and see Mona. And we send them to the store to get milk because there's Max right there. So I like that they have that freedom, and I think a lot of kids, a lot of modern kids don't have that freedom to roam that we feel so comfortable, letting our kids have. So it's really nice.
Yeah, it is nice. I grew up in Long Island, and it was, you were careful. Yeah.
My mom's family actually lived in Bayshore for a little while. Yeah.
Now, you're running for select board.
I am running for select board.
And why are you doing this?
I'm doing this, I think with the current political climate, a lot of people, myself included, have been thinking about, ways to engage more in the community, and ways to sort of live our values here locally as much as possible. And I just think, everybody wins when you have options on the ballot. And so I think it's important for, for every race to be contested, and for everyone to have, choices for who they want representing them, or working for their town. And I also think that it's important for local government, for all government, to reflect the community. And so in that way, I just think it's important to have as much diversity as possible, and give people those options. So yeah.
Well, that's a good idea. And now, what do you talked a little bit about the town, and how the children were free. I understand that.
Yeah.
Having lived in Long Island.
Right. Yeah.
You're not free.
Yeah.
And I've been here over 40 years now. So
yeah.
1962.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Well, it's 50 years.
Yeah.
60 years.
Something 50. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know a lot about the town. What issues do you think are most important?
Yeah, I think something big that we have coming up is going to be the Ilsley renovation. And I think Ilsley is a vital part of our community. And, you know, I think people don't realize just how special Ilsley is. I've lived, as I said, we've moved around a lot, and we moved around a lot with small children. And I can say hands down that Ilsley is the best library I've ever experienced, especially for a town our size. They really have incredible programming for all ages. I have the most experience with their children's programming, of course, because my kids are small. But yeah, I just think, you know, I think people don't realize that that's really a draw to our town. To our town, people are coming in from outside communities and coming here and choosing to spend the day at Ilsley, and probably also choosing to get lunch downtown or do a little shopping. And so I just think it's very important that we continue that, and that we look to the future and expand programs as much as possible.
Yes, I think that Ilsley should stay here. They're thinking of getting bigger, going more space.
Yeah, I think
they need to do it here, I believe, because taking it out of town would hurt the town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we have, you know, we're at the very beginning of this process for the most part, and so I think there's going to be a lot of time for the town to have input, just like we did with the rail project. So I think going forward, it's going to be really important that everybody, you know, has their say, and we make decisions, you know, as forward thinking as possible, and maintain that really important part of our community.
Yes, it is important to think about how long something would stay, like the library, how many years it would be in effect, and what a town might be like when it's.
Yeah, I think too. I mean, you know, sometimes you hear in the news that that libraries are shrinking or libraries aren't doing as well, but that's actually that was true for a while, and now we're seeing a shift where younger people are using libraries more and more, and really accessing them as resources. So I think, you know, I don't think we're going to regret investing in Ilsley as part of our community. It's something that benefits everyone in our town, no matter your economic background, no matter your age. There's something in the library for everyone, and I think it's really important that we have that community space that people can use, that you can use for Boy Scouts, or, you know, or for your book group, or, you know, a lot of the homeschoolers use the space for things. So I just think, you know, we're gonna see a good return on that investment.
There's a lot of clubs, groups of people
that
use the library basement.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And I know they're expanding their teen and tween programming, and I think that's really important too, because again, we're in a fairly small town, you know, and it's important for, you know, us to have things for young people to do. We have a wonderful rec department, but having that space for teens to, you know, it's a safe place for them to go after school, for them to get their homework done, for them to connect with other people in a safe environment. So I think, you know, Ilsley is doing the right thing by really focusing on that group of kids too. Yeah.
And the schools do a good job too.
The schools are wonderful.
Yeah. So I have the question of what you appreciate about the town, but you've told me a lot about appreciating the Ilsley Library.
No, I appreciate so many things about this town. You know, I mentioned before that we had moved around a lot, and you know, we came here, you know, and like a lot of people, you go where the jobs are to a certain extent, you know, and so we didn't necessarily have a lot of options about where we were going to move. We were going to move where we got a good job, you know, and that's what we did. And we felt so grateful to wind up in this community. And immediately when we got here, people were so friendly and extended themselves, and, you know, went out of their ways to to come and speak with us, and that's sort of my takeaway from the town in general, is that, I haven't lived any place that is this civically engaged and interested in building community and, helping people. Everyone I know does a little something, everyone, whether it's through work or, just picking up a few extra things at the grocery store to drop off to the food pantry. It's a really special place, and I hope to be a part of helping that continue.
Mm-hmm. And having TV shows.
And having TV shows, exactly, so that you can know who the candidates are and who who's representing you. I think it's a really important thing.
And I also do people like planning commissioners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think
town people.
Yeah, I think one thing that makes that really special and important is that, for people like me who have young children, sometimes it's hard to get out and go to every meeting. So what you're doing is providing them a way to find out what's going on, and to be there without having to be there if you couldn't get a sitter, or if you were working, a lot of people work evenings, and so coming to evening meetings are hard. So
yeah.
I just think it's really important to do that, and it's definitely a wonderful service.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We have some questions here. Did you read any good books lately?
Have I read any good books lately? I have. I recently read a book called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, and it's a wonderful book. It's a very big book. I went and got it at the Vermont Bookshop, and I had called in and asked them to reserve a copy for me, and then they showed up with this big brick, and plunked it down. So it's a very big book, but it's wonderful, and it tells the story of three people who were Southern Black Americans who traveled out, along the railroad, really, out of Jim Crow South, and wound up in New England and California. One of them wound up in California, but it's a wonderful story, and it tells a lot about our history, our American history, and you wind up really rooting for them. So I definitely recommend that as a book.
What kind of volunteer work have you done? Or you've done any volunteer work? I
have. In town, well, for starters, I've always worked in social services. I graduated from Mount Holyoke with a degree in journalism, which I've never used.
In journalism?
In journalism, yeah. And so, which is sort of something I kind of fell into a little bit. And I do enjoy writing, but more of a hobby. So I, right after school, I wound up volunteering with the AmeriCorps program and moving out to California and building houses for a year with Habitat for Humanity, which was amazing. And so I was 21 years old and fresh out of college, and I was on site with basically a lot of retired roofers and just these really great guys. It was mostly guys, but definitely some women were there too. But I just had a really good experience, and people were really donating their time. I later worked in a domestic violence shelter. Again, this was for work, but I've always tried to look at work as a way of giving back. Here in town, I work full-time for CSAC, the counseling.
Now you work?
Yep. Now, when we first arrived here, I stayed home. Our daughter was fairly young. My son started preschool at Sunshine here in town, and then went on to Mary Hogan. So when we first got here, I was home with my daughter full time, and then as she got a little bit older, I got a job working for the counseling services of Addison County. And so I work in one of their developmental group homes. So it's a home with women who are local Vermonters. They're from the community. They're wonderful people. They have developmental disabilities, and they need a little bit more support in order to fully engage with the community.
Is that physical or mental or both?
Their disabilities?
Yeah.
They're cognitive disabilities.
Yeah.
They're all very able-bodied, wonderful, smart, interesting people with very full lives and are so well loved. And I'll be flat honest, for the most part, they're more popular than me. They know so many people in town, and so many people in town know them, and it's a wonderful place to work. And I really work with the best people at the counseling service. I mean, people really go out of their way to just provide really good a really good experience for people in our community who need a little bit of extra support. So I do that. I also have for a long time volunteered with the Big Brother, Big Sister program. So it's funny because I often fail to bring it up when people ask about volunteer things, because I've been doing it for so long that I don't really think of it as a volunteer job anymore. But if you don't know, the Big Brother, Big Sister program pairs a young person in the community with an adult who can kind of mentor them. So my little sister is now very much an adult, and she just started graduate school at BU for public health. But when I met her, she was 11, and and she had some family background that had made it hard, and she was kind of struggling a little bit academically, and she was really looking for somebody who could help her figure out how to go to college and how to move into adulthood well. And she's just a wonderful addition to our family. I think of her as family now. That's it's moved away from volunteer, and it's just now she's just family.
So do you have any ideas or anything of what you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think my main job as a select board member is to listen to the community, and I think what I hope is that I can bring sort of the understanding that for every person who's in the room, there are 10 or 20 or 100 people who aren't, for whatever reason. I do think a lot of people have trouble getting to meetings and scheduling things. A lot of working families, you might have a single family household, and it's really hard, even under the best circumstances, to find childcare to come to meetings that are in the evening when you're trying to feed your kids and get them in bed and get them ready for the school day. And I think a lot of people, work evening shifts. And so it's always hard for certain people to feel engaged with the process. So I think it's my job as a select board member to seek out opinions and to listen to people and to talk constantly, and let people talk to me, and then reflect back what the town is hoping for to the best of my ability. So that's really what I hope to bring, is just and I hope to bring a little bit of fresh enthusiasm, and like I said, we love it here. It's a wonderful community. We have so many things going for us as a town, and I'd like to continue that. And I do think, to a certain extent, I was just looking, and Vermont in general had been sort of shrinking. We were losing more people than we were gaining for a while, and I think this past year we had a little bit of a bump. So, I do think that that's something we have to look to moving forward, is making sure that we have jobs here when people are finished with school and are ready to settle down, that there are jobs here that people can go into. And I think it's important to look at the reasons why people might choose to move to Vermont if they can. Because I actually know people my generation, I actually know a fair number of people who had the option to move anywhere they wanted. And I know a fair number of people who looked at Vermont. Some of them chose Vermont and some of them chose somewhere else. But I do think with the internet, people are sometimes in a position where they can move anywhere because their work is remote. They just need an internet connection. And so for those people, what they're looking for is a good quality of life, and we have so many of the things that, we're a friendly community, we're a small community, we're safe, we have easy access to so many outdoor things, and pretty easy access to cities, for when you really need a city experience. We're not too far, and so I think we should also think about those folks who might kind of have small town Vermont in mind, and making sure that when they do kind of look and see if a small town in Vermont is the one that they're looking for, that they're finding us, and that they're choosing Middlebury. So,
well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yes. let's see what else I have. Do you have something else you would like to talk about? Some of the issues?
Well, I was listening actually to your interview with Farhad and with Gary Baker, and they had both mentioned an anchor store, bringing an anchor store into town, and they both brought up Ames. It's funny because there was an Ames growing up where I grew up too, in Western Massachusetts, and of course eventually it folded. And I think I have a little bit of a different perspective on that, which is that, you know, I think the idea of a big box store or even a medium-sized box store is
Well, this was a small box
right.
store.
A small box store
but it was pretty good.
Yeah. We had also a small box store. We had an Ames in Western Mass where I grew up. I'm sure they closed at about the same time. But in general, I think, sort of the overall trend is that big box stores and malls are closing. A lot of these chains are closing up shop and are closing a lot of stores. So I think the idea is worth exploring, but really I think we want to invest in our small businesses, in our small independent businesses, and put our, kind of put our eggs in that basket. The big box stores are going to compete with Amazon. They're going to compete with online things, but I think people, especially Vermonters, really will take the time to go out of their way to shop in a small business where it's friendly and they know people. The internet's not going away. That's always going to be, something that we have to compete with. But kind of the overall trend is that Kmart closed a lot of stores. All of the big stores are closing. We had this expansion, and now it's really shrinking.
The stores that come to Vermont, even though they're big, are small.
Right.
I mean, they aren't big, major.
Right.
Well, we have 2 seconds left.
Oh,
so.
hey. This time I talk too much.
Well, so thank you for coming.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening, and we'll be on again sometime.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.